Welcome everyone to the very first edition of the Timmins Sports Report, brought to you this week by Phil Marks of Timmins Garage and by Kamuskosha Snow Resort. On today's show, we catch up with Jamie Roach, president of the Timmins Minor Hockey Association. We talk Timmins Majors, Northern Ontario Junior Hockey League, and the World Juniors with the voice of the Kirkland Lake Gold Miners, Jeff Mackie. And we talk about the human aspects of being an elite athlete with Kapuskasing native, Olympian, and former member of the Canadian Alpine Ski Team, Kelly VanderBeek. I'm here with Jamie Roach, president of the Timmins Minor Hockey Association. Jamie, can you provide us an update on the current TMHA season? Have the numbers gone up from last year? And so far, what's the season been like for everybody involved with Timmins Minor Hockey?
So far, so good. Registration is up slightly over last year's registration. I would say, I don't know if I'd say largely in part, but I would say in part to the launch of the new novice rep program this season.
The TMHA has been involved with a pilot project utilizing balanced teams at the novice level. Can you explain what that is and how it's been working so far at the TMHA level?
Okay, no. So the novice program, the objective is to give as many players and families an opportunity to see what rep hockey is all about, and to educate parents on the facts of rep hockey, and to dispel some of the misconceptions that people might have about cost and travel. And I would say that so far the program has been a success. The teams against each other, the three teams against each other, the scores have all been within a few goals of each other. I don't know if I'd go so far as say a resounding success. It's only November, but we're pleased with the results so far.
The TMHA recently hosted some hockey clinics offered by Hockey Canada. Could you provide some details on how that went and what was involved, and how both players and perhaps even coaches benefited from this particular hockey clinic offered by, once again, Hockey Canada?
We hosted, in conjunction with Hockey Canada, a skills development day, which was 2 on-ice sessions and 2 off-ice sessions for the Adam and Pee-wee group. We had 75 participants in that, so it was sold out. That was the max, and it was a full-day event for the Adam and Pee-wee kids. The off-ice was character building and so on and so forth, and the on ice was hockey instruction.
So I'd like to welcome now for Hockey Talk, Jeff Mackie, a voice of the Kirkland Lake Gold Miners on fasthockey.com. That's www.fasthockey.com, and you'll hear our next guest, Jeff Mackie, doing games and or commentating on games and doing the play-by-play for the Kirkland Lake Gold Miners. Jeff, how are you today?
Good, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So let's start by talking about the Great North Midget League, and more specifically the Timmins Majors. It's been a tough year to date for the Majors, let's be honest. Last time I checked, they were last in the league in the standings, and even more alarming is that they are last in both goals for and goals against. So what can the Majors do to turn things around a little, moving forward after the Christmas break?
Well, that's a tough one, Frank. In the Great North Midget League, you have the challenge of not really being able to turn over your roster like you can at the junior level. And so the players that the Majors have committed to this year are the players that they're going to end the season with. One thing that really stands out for the Majors just is that as difficult as they've had a time in the standings and, second last just in front of Kapuskasing right now, is on the positive side, they've beaten the 3 best teams in the league, Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury, and New Liskeard. So that is something that they can kind of hold up and build upon. I think at this point in time in these players' careers, it's more of an attitude, and it's more of that feeling good about themselves that's important. They're not going to go out and turn things around and all of a sudden become one of the top teams in the league in the second half. It's not realistic. It never happens in this league. Teams that struggle in the first half of the year, they can improve in the second half of the year, but that's what they really need to, I think, focus on right now is the good things that they've done during the first half of the year. And as you said, the challenge really has been scoring. And they've lost a lot of close games, and they've had a lot of games where I think they've played at par with their opponents, but just haven't been able to finish. And so in the second half, I think Matt Tremblay and his crew just have to focus on keeping the attitude really strong on that team and focusing on the positives. And it hasn't helped either that they did not get Dalton Bruce back this year. He went to the Eskies as a 16-year-old, and they weren't able to get the services of Kyle Levy as well, as he made the Eskies too as a 16-year-old. So they were expecting those guys, I think, to come in and give them some offense. That hasn't happened. Still a very young team, and I think at this point in time they have to look at themselves as a work in progress. But a lot of these kids are coming back next year, and this is a chance this year to lay that foundation for next year.
Now, Jeff, if they happen to sneak into the playoffs, do you think it's the kind of team that if they start building and they start getting a little bit of confidence in the second half, even though, as you mentioned just a minute ago, that they may not be able to make a run to first place in the league, but if they do sneak into the playoffs, is this the kind of team that may be able to, if not duplicate what happened last year when the Majors made a run in the playoffs, can potentially at least make a little bit of noise in the playoffs?
I think that they have the potential to really test whatever team they play in that first round, because as I said, they've beaten the three best teams in the league. There's no doubt that they can't play with those guys. But I think it's a little bit of a different team this year, a little bit younger, not quite as much experience. They don't have like a Nick Houghton on the back end this year, per se, that is an all-star defenseman, and the goaltending is a little bit more inexperienced than it was last year with Devin DeBatos now moving on to junior in Kirkland Lake. So I think it's a little bit unrealistic to think that they're going to, say, pull an upset like Timmins did last year and go all the way to the finals, but they've played the teams at the top of the standings very tough this year, so there's no reason why they can't go into the series thinking that they can pull the upset. There's no reason why they should feel like they have to lie down to those big teams. So it'll be an interesting second half to the season, and either way, like, these kids are going to grow a lot in the second half. It's just amazing how quickly these guys develop in the course of half a season of junior. Just with the way that the schedule is, playing quite a few games, the practices that they have, they're all going to develop physically as well. And next year, I expect Timmins to be a team that is improved for sure next year.
So moving on up a little bit in the rankings or in age groups, the NOJHL is also going strong, and although Timmins has no team in the league, there is certainly a local flavor with several Timmins players scattered amongst several of the NOJHL teams. Can you highlight which ones have stood out in the league play this season? I think, for example, Devin DeBastos, who played for the Majors last year, is one of the goalies for KL. And are there a couple of others? You can touch on Devin if you want, because he's having a pretty good year. Although I find that he's probably not getting the goal support, because his goals against average is equal to his goaltending partner, but his record certainly doesn't seem to reflect that.
That's right. It's been, I guess, Devin's sort of had the type of season that you would expect an 18-year-old goalie to have in the NOJHL, and 18 years old in junior is still pretty young. And he's been his first year, and he's seen a lot of action against some of the weaker teams in the league. And so there were some games where he'd have about 15 shots or so and would hardly get a scoring chance, but he stood in there and he was really good. Sometimes those games are the tougher games to play. And now as he's getting starts against, as the games start to come up, the minors have had a few road trips now and a number of back-to-back games. He's starting to get some action against the tougher teams. And, in my mind, I think he's adjusting very well to that. And it's just, I know Mark Lafleur doesn't want to put too much pressure on him, just an 18-year-old kid. He wants to ease him into the league, and he sees him as somebody that can be starting goalie next year, and then the year after that, if he decides he wants to come back as a 20-year-old. So Devin's done very well. Another young Timmins kid from the Gold Miners is Tyler Romaine, who many of your listeners have watched over the years in Timmins. And Tyler is not the biggest guy, as we all know, 5'5", about 150. And there was a sort of talk about how he would do here at the junior A level. And so far this year, he's really come in and he's done a good job at both ends of the ice for Kirkland Lake. And Coach Mark Lafleur he's seen Tyler as kind of a project in the sense that he wants to turn him into a guy that can play in all three zones, and he wants him to pay attention to the details in the defensive zone. And so a lot of the ice time he's seen has been on the fourth line. He hasn't gotten an awful lot of power play time, although he does see the ice on the power play on some occasions. But I've really been impressed just about how hard he's competed, and just that despite his size, he goes in there looking to win all those battles, and he's averaging nearly a point a game, so he's still scoring. And he's also scored a few big goals for this team as well, like some game winners in the third period. So I like him because he's like an agitating type guy, gets under the opponent's skin, and has really embraced this role as more of an energy role player, but still chipping in with the offense. And some of the other kids in the league are with the Eskies right now, and one kid that I know has done very well there has been Ryan Kerr this year, and he had a 5-point game on the weekend, the defenseman that played his minor hockey in Timmins, and he's really coming into his own this year as a junior player, finally really putting up the points that you would expect somebody that has his history to do. And as well, his defensive game is really coming along very well. He's becoming a really difficult guy to play against because he's got that physical edge to his game, but now he's finally, I guess, harnessing it, really learning to stay out of the penalty box, learning to pick his spots in terms of going for the hits. So Ryan's done a really good job for the Eskies. And as well, we'll just mention Nick Houtman, who just came over to the Eskies in that trade from KL. And even though in KL he didn't get a lot of ice time, I thought he really was steady for them, and he really showed a lot of potential. And to me, he's a bit of a late bloomer, because a couple of years ago he's with the Majors, and he was kind of a scrawny, tall guy, and you could see that he had the tools, but he hadn't filled out yet. And I asked a couple of executives here in the NOJHL, what do you think of this kid? Do you think he can play next year? And they were saying, well, you know what, probably not, but he'll go back to junior, and then we're going to take a look at him the year after, or he'll go back to midget, and we'll take a look at him the year after that. And he made such huge strides last year, and this year there was quite a bit of interest in him. He came to KL, played pretty well for them, and now went to the Eskies in the Jamie Lozon trade, and got 4 points on the weekend in one game. So he's just a guy that I think still has to fill out, but he handles the puck very well. He's so composed, and to me, he's got some good offensive instincts, even though he's a very smart defensive player. So he's a player that I think the Eskies were really fortunate to get, and if he comes back next year and the year after that, Frank, I think he's really going to be a force in this league.
Perfect. So let's take a minute to talk some junior hockey. It's almost holiday time, which means, of course, the World Juniors are coming up soon. On paper, as they do every year, Team Canada looks to have a solid lineup. A couple of things I want to go over with you, though, because I know you also follow the CHL and Major Junior quite a bit. What's the first thing that went through your mind when you saw the highlights of Connor McDavid dropping the gloves and breaking his hand?
Well, I think it was just what would his availability be for the World Juniors, and just that this year, with it being in Montreal and Toronto, it's like the crown jewel for Hockey Canada. This is going to be their largest tournament in terms of having media attention, having fans in 2 NHL arenas. That's never been done before on this scale for Hockey Canada. So I think that Connor McDavid, I believe, thinks he's going to play. I mean, he's planning on playing right now, and that's what he should be doing if he hasn't been told otherwise. But I hear it's looking pretty good for him to be able to be ready at least for the start of the actual preliminary round on Boxing Day. He may not be quite ready, say, for the start of training camp. He may not even get into any of the exhibition games. But that'll give him 5 weeks or so, 6 weeks maybe, of actual healing time, which is what they said would be required for him with this injury.
And I think he's obviously an important add for Team Canada. I mean, he's arguably the best junior player in the world. I mean, Jack Eichel of the U.S. Is a close second, but I think if you listen to most hockey experts, I think they like Connor McDavid's game just a little bit better. Anyhow, let's touch on something else. Canada has, once again, I think they did this 2 years ago. They've only invited 2 goalies to camp, including Zach Foucault of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League and the Montreal Canadiens, who was the goalie last year. Do you think this is a smart move? And you travel and talk to a lot of hockey people. Do most of them think internally? I mean, you hear what the prognosticators say on TV, but do you think it's a smart move to only bring 2 goalies to camp, or is competition a little bit better to have 3 or 4 kids there that can compete for the 2 jobs?
You know what? I really think it's a good idea to just invite the kids that you want to have there, and I think if they weren't sold on Comrie and Foucault as their goaltenders, then maybe they would invite 4 of them. But I really think that these 2 kids are known to Hockey Canada. Obviously, they've come up through the under-18 program and just been very good for Canada on the international stage. I'm a huge proponent as well of actually showing up for your training camp with your roster. I mean, I don't know really what's accomplished at this point by bringing 40 kids to camp, only to have to cut 20 of them or 18 of them or whatever. I'm not sure exactly how many kids are in camp, but maybe it's only closer to 30 this year. But I like to hit the ground running. I like to see that at the beginning it's like, well, we're going to commit to you guys. You're the team that we want. We're going to start working on systems and stuff the first day. Everybody's going to be on board. You don't have to worry when you come here if you're going to be staying here. I think that really works well at the international level. The Americans did well for a number of years doing that, having their team named and coming to camp as a team. And now they've kind of gotten away from that in the last few years as well. They have a selection camp as well as Canada does. But now, in terms of the goaltenders, they're sold on these guys. Bring them to camp. Let them get acclimatized. Let them get as much action as possible early on and have them ready to go for the tournament.
So the other question we have, of course, every year in Canada is that, our team invariably would be much stronger if every player who's eligible to play for Team Canada were eligible. So first and foremost, I guess the first question is, do you think Hockey Canada, because as you said earlier, they are hosting the event now in basically their 2 biggest hockey markets, Toronto and Montreal. It's a big tournament for Hockey Canada. How much backroom negotiating do you think Tom Rennie and Benoit Groux are doing with some of the NHL teams to make sure that some of those eligible players who, they might be playing for their NHL team but aren't playing a major role would come back? I mean, I'm not expecting Aaron Ekblad to come back from Florida, but a guy like Bo Horvath, Anthony Duclair of the Rangers, how hard do you think the Hockey Canada is working the phones to try to get those kids available for the camp on the 19th?
Oh, I don't think there's any question that Hockey Canada sees this as a premier event and wants to have all of the talent available. And as you said, Ekblad, not going to happen. But one player that I think might have the best chance might be Curtis Lazar in Ottawa. He's been talked about as a possibility to go. And now that his coach is Dave Cameron, I know Dave he was the coach a few years ago of Hockey Canada, and he has very strong ties to Hockey Canada. He may be able to see the benefit of letting Lazar go. And then obviously it's up to Brian Murray in the end, but Dave could maybe have some sway there in terms of letting Lazar go. Horvat, Duclair, those are possibilities as well. And Tom Rennie used to be a part of the New York Rangers organization years back. He used to be their coach, but Glenn Sather was there at the time. He's still has a good relationship with Glenn Sather, and Glenn's very sees the benefit as well of that World Junior experience. And so I think that the definite possibilities, but I think nobody wants to commit too early. I think what happens is that we want to make sure that we're not going to need these players, because, if the New York Rangers or Vancouver Canucks get a rash of injuries in the next couple of weeks, then it doesn't really make a lot of sense for them to have to send that player to the World Juniors and then have to use up your salary cap calling up players from the AHL and stuff like that. So it'll be more of a last-minute thing. And they're going to evaluate how these guys are going as well, and they might decide, no, this is the next couple of weeks are a big couple of weeks for us. We need as many players as possible. So it'll be the individual teams making up their mind, but I think that they're probably a little more open to it this year, just given what's at stake. It's a chance for these guys to play in front of their hometown fans, home country fans, in NHL arenas. It's a huge opportunity for them that, and they're going to get primetime ice as well. So that's a big thing for them. So it'll come right down to the wire either way, but it's really hard to say right now because they're not really tipping their hat either way.
Well, that does it for this edition of Hockey Talk. Jeff, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Next time on Hockey Talk, we'll definitely make some time to talk NHL and also follow up on the World Juniors and talk some local hockey, because I think it's important to highlight the kids that are doing such a good job in Northeastern Ontario playing the game we all love. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to hear more of Jeff Mackie, he is the voice of the Kirkland Lake Gold Miners and can be heard on www.fasthockey.com. The Timmins Sports Report strives to discuss sports-related issues with experts both from our community and from across the country. We are pleased to welcome for this first edition Kapuskasing native, Olympian, former member of the Canadian Women's Alpine Ski Team, sportscaster, public speaker, and mom to the youngest accredited journalist at the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Kelly VanderBeek. You are originally from Kapuskasing and grew up in Kitchener, which is not necessarily regarded as a hotbed for alpine skiing. What advice can you give to young skiers who don't necessarily live in Collingwood, Banff, or Whistler and might live in a community such as Timmins with a much smaller hill than you would get in these bigger ski resorts, but still want to pursue competitive skiing?
My coach said it best when he said, if you can do 4 turns, you can do 100 turns. And I completely bought in and believed it. And so on my hill, it was tiny. I literally could do 4 turns. But you don't need shiny and new and fancy and big in order to be successful. What you need comes from within and comes from the team that you surround yourself with. And that's another piece of advice for athletes is surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with people who are going to motivate you, push you, encourage you, and challenge you. And so that's what's important, not the size of your hill.
What are some of the key challenges currently facing young skiers in Canada? How do you think those problems can be addressed?
Well, demographics is probably our biggest challenge in Canada in all sports, is just having exposure to top athletes, being around them, getting to see them. And thankfully, like the internet and television and those kinds of things have really made our world a lot smaller. And so I would encourage athletes to just go online, Google and follow athletes who are doing great things, and then also just source and look for videos of kids their own age who might be posting, race video from their stuff in Europe and things like that. And just think a little bit outside the box to try and engage outside of Timmins or outside of Kapuskasing or Northern Ontario to really open your world a little bit and get the technical exposure. And it's not the same as being in Europe. It's not the same as being on a mountain where if all of Canada came to the same place. But, use what you got and flog it for all it's worth.
Next, I'd like to touch on 2 moments from your career that speak to the realities of elite competition and the perseverance that is needed to be successful at that level. Every athlete goes through disappointing moments in their career. And in the first part, how did you deal with the fact you missed out on an Olympic medal in Torino by 3/100ths of a second?
Well, and that's actually one of the odd things about that experience for me is that wasn't a negative experience at all for me. So in my career, finishing 4th at the Olympics, I'd never even had a top 10 finish. So for me, standing in the winner's circle for over 30 minutes and coming so close to an Olympic medal, don't get me wrong, it was heartbreaking to not come away with that Olympic medal. 3/100ths of a second. At that point, it's essentially a tie. I would have really preferred a tie for bronze. However, I was still elated with my performance. It was the best. I skied the best I possibly could have skied on that day. And so I left very motivated, very excited, and very engaged to face the challenges that laid ahead. And I couldn't wait for Vancouver to come. For me, the real challenges that came, and that I hope athletes know out there anywhere in any sport, is that I used to think that winners never wavered, and that is completely false. Winners waver. Everybody I know who's made it to the top has almost quit several times over their career, whether it's because they're 14 years old and they feel like they're missing their grade 8 graduation and that really bothers them, or they're missing their high school graduation or their friends' birthdays, or just getting to hang out on the couch with their buddies in high school. It's hard, especially in that period, to feel like you're not missing out. And I guess that it's that period where I really hope young athletes know that although a lot of people use the term that to be an athlete takes a lot of sacrifice, I don't see it as a sacrifice. Having the vantage point now from a retired athlete and a new mom and things like that, nothing about sport is a sacrifice, because that indicates a loss. And I think there's only things to be gained from being an athlete. It might be different than what your average person's doing in school, and that can be scary, but it's definitely not a sacrifice.
Then, of course, in late 2009, you injured your knee in a race in Europe, in Val d'Isère, I believe, right before the Olympics in Vancouver, which were essentially taking place in your backyard. How did you deal with the disappointment of preparing for the Vancouver Games for essentially 4 years after the close call in Torino, and then to have that dream end basically with that injury in Val d'Isère a few months before the actual Games in Vancouver?
Well, for me, that was obviously a very low point. As soon as I crashed, I knew instantly that my Olympic dreams for Vancouver were over, and that was heartbreaking. At the same time, I was in excruciating pain, but as I was going down the ski hill and I was in the sled and they were loading me into the ambulance, and as I was lying on my back about to go into the ambulance, I couldn't see anybody. All I could see was blue sky from where I was lying, and the sky had that, any Northern Ontario person can relate, when it's really cold, it's almost sparkling from the crystals, the crystallization in the air. And I just sort of went, it's just a knee, I'll be okay. And I chose, and I very consciously chose, not to turtle, not to put my head in the sand and to just sort of check out and say, you know, this is awful, I want to pretend the Olympics aren't happening. Instead, I did the total opposite, and I had the support of people around me to do that. John Furlong called me and he was like, do you want to carry the torch? And I did that, and it was an incredibly powerful experience, much more moving than I ever expected, to carry the torch. And then I worked with television in Vancouver and in Whistler with CTV and the conglomerate, and that I almost turned down that job because I wanted to party, I wanted to have fun, I wanted to do whatever, and it ended up being the most fun I'd had. I felt so engaged and excited to see Canada be so alive during those Olympic Games and so united during those Olympic Games. And so all of these things and all of these people that I met and interacted with and were open to those experiences, they helped me get through the injury. They helped me get to a point now where, you know, I ended up getting back to the World Cup. I raced a little bit, but my knee isn't what it was. It never will be, and I've accepted that. But it can always be worse, and so that's how I choose to look at life, that I feel like everything's a blessing.
During the recent Sochi Olympics, you profiled the moms of several Canadian Olympians for CBC in their coverage. Can you perhaps share 2 or 3 common themes that many of these moms shared about being the mom of an elite athlete that could help other moms listening to this interview?
I think I got a lot of advice from some incredible moms. So I've worked and spoke extensively with now over 15 moms who have raised world champions and World Cup champions. And the most common theme that I find coming out of these conversations is that they never motivated their child. It came from within them. However, the biggest role and the most important role that they played as moms was presence, was being there, was just being in the stands, being the consistent person or figure in their life, their child's life, where they knew. It gave them comfort, and it also gave them the ability to push outside their box, to push their limits, and to be very vulnerable and raw as an athlete, because you're being judged when you're out there. That really a mom's most important role is to just be there, to just be, and even if you can't be there physically, to be there emotionally, to listen, to know that you'll give them a hug, win or lose, at the end of their competition. That to me was probably the biggest lesson I've taken from these moms.
So I can't let you go without asking you about the youngest accredited journalist at the 2014 Olympics in Sochi, your son Cooper, who was essentially a newborn when you had to make your way to do some work with CBC at the Olympics in Sochi, and who received an official accreditation from the Olympic Organizing Committee so that you could take him anywhere pretty much inside the Olympic venues and in the Olympic Village. Can you tell our viewers, or share with our viewers, how that all came about, and what type of experience it was for you to have your son essentially there throughout the whole games with you?
It was certainly a leap of faith to bring a 3-month-old to the Olympics, especially me, just a new mom with a 3-month-old. For my husband to know he was, for the most part, in charge of a 3-month-old throughout the games. And then the challenge of what an Olympic means because of accreditation is it is your passport to everything. And if you have this letter on your accreditation and not this letter, it means you can go here but not there and all. So it was a bit of a logistic nightmare to get us all there and to get us appropriately accredited, because I couldn't even apply for a passport till he was born. So all these things that you don't think of, and Russia, you had to get a visa to get into the country. So logistically, it was very challenging. And of course, every person I ran into was like, "Are you insane? You can't bring a 3-month-old to Russia. It's dangerous. It's all these like you're crazy." And so there were some very real hurdles in order to get there. Becky Scott was a huge help for us. She was with the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. So it was actually her and her connections with the IOC that made it all finally come together, because it wasn't really coming together in January, and I was like a bit of a panic moment. And then because of Becky Scott and the IOC, it all came together beautifully, and everybody still, even in Russia, were like, "You got to be kidding me! You brought an infant!" And yeah, it was great. Probably one of the best things we've chosen to do.
Well, that does it for this first edition of the Timmins Sports Report, brought to you by Phil Marks of Timmins Garage and by the Kamoskosha Snow Resort. I'd like to thank our guests, Jamie Roach, Jeff Mackie, and Kelly VanderBeek. My name is Frank Rock, and this was the Timmins Sports Report.